Hello everybody, Resonance here, and today I'm going to showcase the demo for Feudal Wars. Feudal Wars is an upcoming free-to-play browser-based RTS styled after the great RTS titles of the 90s, such as Age of Empires 2, Warcraft 2, and StarCraft 1. I'm particularly excited about this project because if it succeeds, Feudal Wars could be the next Age of Empires game that we were all waiting for. As of this video, the game is still currently very early in development, but the Kickstarter will launch in January 2016 and the game is scheduled for release sometime later that year. Feudal Wars will contain many of the things that you love about Age of Empires 2, and it will run on a completely modern and optimized game engine. If all goes well, you can finally say goodbye to the archaic netcode and game engine that has limited Age of Empires 2 for so long. Feudal Wars will feature similar gameplay, graphics, and mechanics to Age of Empires 2, as well as the classic 8-player multiplayer, a single-player campaign, and a very detailed map editor. The engine is built in HTML5 and JavaScript. It requires no downloads or plugins and will be completely free to play. Right now it has only been tested in Google Chrome, but eventually it should run in all modern browsers. I will have links to the Feudal Wars website, their dev blog, social media, and eventually their Kickstarter in the video description below. Currently, you can experiment in the map editor or try the various Feudal Wars demos. So today, I'll be playing the one called Castle Assault. Now before I play the demo and go over some of the specific details of Feudal Wars, let me answer a few quick questions first. I'm sure that some of you might be wondering why I'm doing this and not playing Empires Apart. I would love to do some content on Empires Apart, and the only reason that I'm not doing it right now is because the developers never asked me to. Chris, the lead developer of Feudal Wars, reached out to me a few months ago about his project, and I've been giving him feedback ever since. While I can't be sure yet how Feudal Wars will turn out, I really like the idea, and I look forward to seeing how it evolves over time. I would like to support anyone that tries to create an old-school RTS on a modern engine, or just follow their dreams in general. So that's why I'm here today, to bring attention to a project you might be interested in, and to provide my honest thoughts and feedback. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like rating as well as a comment below. While I don't get a chance to respond to each comment individually, I do read them all, and I'm curious to hear what you think of the Feudal Wars demo. And before we begin, I do livestream Age of Empires 2 and other games on Twitch TV regularly, and you can find my livestream schedule on my Twitch page by scrolling underneath the video player there. To give you a brief overview of the game's features, I'll showcase the early development trailer first, and then we'll jump straight into the demo right after that. So that was the trailer, and what stands out the most to me is how versatile the game engine truly is. Feudal Wars can support massive map sizes and tons of units without any lag. Alright, so without further ado, the demo is called Castle Assault, and the goal is to destroy as many enemy castles as you can before the 7-minute timer is up. You start with a few different types of soldiers, and you can create more with the gold that you earn from killing enemy units and buildings. There are 4 types of soldiers, and they all have the same health value of 100. The first is the Long Swordsman, which costs 20 gold and has an attack value of 15. The second unit is the Archer, and it costs 30 gold and has an attack value of 10. The third unit is the Horned Knight, and it costs 40 gold with an attack value of 20. Those 3 units all move at the same speed. The fourth and last unit is the Cavalry, and it costs 60 gold and it has 30 attack, but more importantly, it moves significantly faster than all of the other units. It's important to note that the units and buildings in the demo have no armor, but armor will be added to the game in a later version. The 4 units that you see in the demo are all placeholder units that were designed by George Agitos and were ported over from his Age of Empires 2 reskin mod. If you're interested in checking out his mod, I'll have linked to that in the video description below. The buildings, though, are all original, and Chris Morton created them specifically for Feudal Wars. Both artists intend to work on the game full-time, and the music in Feudal Wars is also entirely original and was made by 2 UK composers under the company Contour Chromatic. So the rest of this video is just going to be me playing the Castle Assault demo while giving you guys my honest thoughts and feedback on Feudal Wars. So first off, the gameplay in the Castle Assault demo isn't particularly compelling, but that's not really the point. Chris, the lead developer of Feudal Wars, released this demo as more of a demonstration of how the game engine works, like a proof of concept and a tech demo, rather than anything that's supposed to be indicative of what the final product will be like. Feudal Wars, when it's finished, will have a much more similar gameplay style to something like Age of Empires 2 than, what we see here, and it'll be a lot more polished. Like, right now you can see that there's not really much of a UI here yet, so this is more or less just to showcase how, versatile and powerful the game engine is, and it's something that I'm actually very, very impressed with. I'm amazed at how seamless the zooming in and out is, and how well the game engine actually runs with so many units and such ridiculously large map sizes. When I play something like the Age of Empires 2 HD Edition remake on Steam, we can see that on the largest map sizes, ludicrous, and the 500 population settings, that the game really starts to struggle. The Age of Empires 2 game engine was never really meant to handle maps of that size or battles of that scale, so this is perhaps where Feudal Wars comes in as a way to, liberate the gameplay that we know and love away from that game engine that has held back Age of Empires 2 for so long. I don't know about you, but I can't wait to play some online matches of Feudal Wars or, whatever, cool RTS games come out in the future, where I don't have to worry about things like, out of syncs, for example, and all sorts of input delay. So, that's something that I'm definitely impressed with. And to be honest, I was initially a little bit skeptical about Feudal Wars when Chris sent me it. I've been talking to him a lot since then, and I have to say I feel a lot better about it now that I can play the demo and see that while the project is incredibly ambitious, with the support and feedback of the entire community, including myself, hopefully we can maybe build this project into something bigger and better. If Microsoft is, hesitant to go for some sort of full HD overhaul of the Age of Empires classics, or they don't really want to make Age of Empires 4 yet, perhaps this is something that as a community we're capable of doing ourselves. I'll have to see. I actually have very high hopes for projects like Feudal Wars and the Empires Apart game, as well as just the HD remake of Age of Empires 2 on Steam. I hope that this is a wake-up call for developers and the big game companies out there that the RTS community as a whole is not dead, and that if you build a very, very good RTS game, people will come. StarCraft 2 is an amazing game, but I feel like it shouldn't be the only RTS game. It feels very different compared to games like Age of Empires 2, and while I love StarCraft 2 and I think it's amazing, I was hoping for more or less a return to the basics, the type of things that I really liked about Age of Empires 2. I want to see more of those in modern RTS games, and hopefully this is where Feudal Wars comes in, so I can't wait to see where this project goes. So one quick important thing to note is that, as of this video, according to Chris, nobody has actually been able to destroy all 20 castles in the time limit, and it might be impossible. I don't think the demo is actually ever intended to be beaten. Now, the run that you see in this video is definitely not my best one, as I did intentionally play this one a little bit slower, and I spent the first 30 seconds or so trying to showcase unit movement, so you should be able to get a better score than me, and in your comment, I would love to hear what you think of Feudal Wars, and if you'd like me to do perhaps some follow-up videos and content on it in the future, as well as what your score was. So feel free to let us know. I would love to take a look at those. Now, there are a couple very interesting things to note about the Feudal Wars game engine. For starters, it utilizes a very similar graphic style to the one that we're all used to in Age of Empires 2. It uses pre-rendered 3D graphics, so it's basically 2D, but it looks a lot cleaner, and this is a graphic style that I think a lot of people really enjoy because not only is it very clean and easy to look at, but it also goes in line with Chris's main ideas of accessibility and scalability. When you're using these 2D graphics, you're actually able to have much larger map sizes and, larger armies of units than if you were actually rendering the 3D graphics in real time. So this allows for massive scalability, and it also makes the game a lot easier to access since people won't have to worry about whether or not it runs on their lower-end computers. So that's really nice. Still, though, the graphics in Feudal Wars will look a lot nicer than the ones in Age of Empires 2, despite being in a similar style, and this is because, of course, in Feudal Wars we have 16 million colors instead of 256, so I can't wait to see the much richer graphics and all sorts of effects that get added in the final version, as Feudal Wars is going to be a beautiful-looking game. Feudal Wars will also have a completely modern networking layer, so hopefully this means I get to experience the wonders of Age of Empires 2 style gameplay without having to deal with the archaic netcode. Things like lag and out of sync should hopefully be a thing of the past in Feudal Wars. Some other stuff is that each civilization will have a unique set of artwork, so the Spanish and English are currently completed, and the rest of the Spanish will be uploaded to the map editor shortly. Players can easily add textures, units, trees, and buildings into the game. Feudal Wars will be heavily moddable to allow for custom games like the ones in Warcraft 3 that contain scripting, triggers, cinematics, and much more. So really, I just can't wait to see what players will be able to accomplish with the Feudal Wars engine once it's complete. Chris himself has been working on Feudal Wars since January 2015, so we're coming up on about 1 year of development, and the game itself is slated for release sometime this year. The Kickstarter will launch in January 2016, so incredibly soon, and then Chris is going to dedicate his full time to the game. This is around the time that we'll see a lot of the placeholder artwork in Feudal Wars get replaced with a brand new, shiny set of artwork specifically for the game. During the Kickstarter, Chris plans to have various promotional minigames, such as the Battle of Agincourt, which hopefully I pronounced correctly, and a tower defense map, which will be released as Kickstarter rewards until the full game is ready. The idea behind these minigames is that Chris is hoping to use them as a great source of feedback from the community to help with the development process. One thing that Chris is particularly passionate about is his decision to make Feudal Wars a browser-based game. Chris loves the accessibility of it, that you can just go to an address and click play without having to download or install anything. He also talks a lot about how browsers have become so advanced now, with HTML5 particularly, that they can actually handle all of the performance requirements of classic RTS gameplay. To be honest, I was initially a little bit skeptical when I was talking to Chris about this, as when I think about browser games, there's like a little bit of a stigma attached to it, where I feared that perhaps the browser would actually limit the scope of what Feudal Wars could actually be, and it would be too much of a limiter, but after playing the Feudal Wars demo and seeing the engine in action and playing around with the map editor, I actually have a lot of faith that perhaps the browser won't be actually a limiting factor at all in Feudal Wars development. One thing, though, that I do hope regardless is that Feudal Wars eventually has some form of client outside of the browser, because even though browsers have become advanced enough now that perhaps they can actually build a game like Feudal Wars without having any drawbacks, there will still be some degree of stigma attached to a browser game, I think, and there will just be people, I believe, who will just prefer to play it in a client for whatever reason. And having a client also means that Feudal Wars could potentially be added to something like Steam, which would really help with, getting the word out and building the community. So I hope that Chris considers adding an offline client at some point, and perhaps if there's enough demand for it, that's something that we could see later down the pipeline. So that's something that I'm hoping for. Another point that Chris emphasizes a lot is this idea of a return to the basics. To quote him directly, "We want to capture everything great about classic RTS games, put it in the browser, and make it free for everyone." Now that's a design policy I can get behind. So really, Chris believes that one of the reasons why many RTS companies try and fail is because they can't resist the temptation to add unnecessary things that just dilute the gameplay experience. As Chris puts it, the goal is to not over-innovate classic RTS mechanics, but instead fine-tune and improve upon them. In his words, Feudal Wars goes back to the roots of what makes RTS a genre: unit counters, balanced civilizations, technology trees, and a resource-based economy system. Also, Feudal Wars will thankfully not be some bastardized hybrid form of RTS, just a good old-fashioned classic strategy game. The game itself will be funded through a Kickstarter that begins really soon, and I'll have a link to that in the video description below as soon as it begins. Chris is going to sell things like early beta access, in-game merchandise, and skins. None of the rewards will be in-game enhancements though, so there's going to be no exclusive access to special units, civilizations, or technologies. Feudal Wars will be completely free to play, not pay to win. The only in-game rewards will be cosmetics such as skins, avatars, and vanity items, which is something I am very, very glad to hear. One thing that I'm particularly happy about is that Chris is putting emphasis on necessary features like a map editor before throwing together the base game. So I hope in the future we can also expect a very comprehensive replay system and a good spectator system as well. Another thing that I particularly like about Feudal Wars is the more realistic approach to the graphics as opposed to the cartoony style of Age of Empires Online, for example. So really when I play Feudal Wars, I already feel exactly at home as though I was just playing Age of Empires 2. Now at some point I might make an entirely separate video on this topic, but I did want to touch upon these points briefly in this video. So this is of course reasons why I like Age of Empires 2 and why I'm excited for games like Grey Goo, Empires Apart, and Feudal Wars, because they make a return to the mechanics that I really like about Age of Empires. That's not to say that I don't like modern RTS games like StarCraft 2, I just feel like they're very, very different games. In fact, StarCraft 2 is one of my favorite games of all time and one that I really, really enjoy playing. It's just, it feels very, very different. So that's why I get so excited when I look at a project like Feudal Wars, because it emulates the type of gameplay that I haven't seen developers experiment with in a very, very long time. A couple things that I really like about Age of Empires would be that it manages to maintain both a complex economy and military at the same time, without really losing that much depth there. A lot of modern RTS games make some substantial cuts to the economic aspect of the game in terms of adding all sorts of specific special abilities on the units and put a much bigger emphasis on micro than we see in something like Age of Empires, which still manages to make micro important without making it the entire game. Age of Empires also uses a system of large-scale decision-making, which I also really, really like. I like this idea of planning out your strategy, and it comes down to, even more so than execution, also just having a coherent game plan. I also think that soft counters are a very interesting idea too. This idea that you use something like Spearman against a knight, and while your pikeman might beat the knight, it's not because the pikeman beats the knight one-on-one, it's that the pikeman's cheaper, so you're able to make a lot more of them, and they have a very, very big attack bonus, but they carry a lot of meaningful drawbacks with them. So Age of Empires just has incredibly compelling gameplay, and I'm really glad to see games experiment more with the classic RTS basics that I haven't seen in a while. Basically, I'm a firm believer that if you build a good old-school RTS game on a modern engine and you do a great job, then the people will come. Still though, I have some concerns about this project. For example, a lack of official plans for any sort of offline client. I really think that that's important that this game has a non-browser based client eventually. And another thing is that, of course, the scope of development is just very, very ambitious. While Chris has shown us that he's incredibly capable and his small team already has been doing a great job, I wonder if there's actually any potential here that Chris could team up with the Forgotten team that brought us those DLCs that were absolutely amazing for Age of Empires 2 HD Edition. If at some point, maybe the Forgotten team, once their contract is up, maybe they could join with Chris, and then they could build this amazing Feudal Wars RTS game together without any sort of creative restrictions. That would be really cool. I'm not sure if that's actually a realistic idea, and that might not be possible at all, but it's something that I like to dream about. Really, when I look at games like Feudal Wars, Empires Apart, and Grey Goo, whether or not they're successes, it just makes me feel great about the future of Age of Empires 2 and RTS games in general, and Age of Empires 2 HD Edition as well. There was, a period where we hadn't really seen developers pursue the, similar gameplay of Age of Empires 2 in a long time, and developers seem to have gotten a little bit scared about just building another RTS game, so I really can't wait to see what's in store for strategy games in the future, and I can't wait to bring you guys more Age of Empires 2 content, as well as content for other games. So as always, thank you so much for the support, guys. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. This video took a long time to produce, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read all of your guys' thoughts on Feudal Wars and follow this project into the future. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching. You can find everything you need in the video description below, and I'll see you guys either on my live stream or in the next YouTube video.